Hello, and thank you so much for listening to this podcast in advance. This is Meredith, and I'm here with my friend Amy, who I think is a pretty exceptional thinker and a really spiritually connected person that I've had the pleasure and the luxury of meeting in the last few months. And I, I came up with this idea sort of based on the Matrix movies of red pill, blue pill, because that reminded me too much of red team, blue team in terms of American politics. I decided to make up my own pill, and Amy has been very amazing and is the ideal conversation partner for me. And so we are going to spend this next however long discussing what is the gold pill and what is the origin of that, and like what does it mean for each of us individually, and hopefully we can make this gold pill egregore grow. So hello, Amy.
Hi, Mare.
Hey girl, how is your day?
My day's going great. Thanks for having me.
Yes.
I love speaking with you, so this should be a lot of fun.
Woohoo.
Thanks for coming up with the idea of the gold pill.
Yeah, it's just like what I said. It like the red pill, blue pill idea is so like mired with like US politics at this point. And I think the one thing that like maybe bonds us or like we connect on is how much we both like loathe US politics.
Well, I don't really like politics. You know what? It's kind of just like I don't like being told what to do. And so I guess
Right.
that's where that all starts. So I've been an only child, so I grew up like teaching myself a lot of shit. And so because of that, I basically kind of have an issue with authority, and for better or for worse. And I do all my stuff, but I definitely like to listen to myself above all else. And I have a lot of life experiences that also lean into why I choose to listen to, or I listen to myself, but I consider other people's opinions. I just kind of all consider them equally. And so just because someone's wearing a white lab coat doesn't make them maybe more informed on something for me, or just because someone is wearing a suit and tie I'll listen to what they have to say in their advice, but it's always really good. The gold pill aspect to me wants to weigh that against what I know to be true for me. And so that's how I conduct myself in this crazy world.
Heck yeah. And I can totally see what you're saying. It's like there's a rebellious sort of like heretical type of mystical gene, I think, that just kind of courses through certain people,
Veins.
through certain things and people and stuff and
Or veins,
veins.
vein.
Oh,
Yes.
yes, courses through certain veins, some but not all, I think. And that kind of rebellious spirit is what like pulled us together, right? And I think that perhaps because like certain authority figures are like really lifted up right now to the heavens, and they can be wrong, we can be sometimes blinded by the facade or the mirage of like someone proselytizing themselves as a savior. And I would say that like the
Red flag alert.
red flag alert, right? I know.
Yeah.
So I think part of the gold pill that I like is that like we are our own saviors. That's kind of
what I think. I love that. And then beyond that, it's like, okay, so if no one can save you, only you can save yourself. That's really great example. And then by doing that and strengthening yourself and focusing that attention on yourself,
right.
like briefly, other people are watching you do it, and over time they start seeing that like this is a mechanism at work. And I'm not saying they go on the full on like heretical mode, but maybe just in certain parts of their life, they feel a little more, I don't know, comfortable speaking up for themselves. Right. I mean, I'll let you know, when my dad was sick in the hospital, and unable to like really advocate for himself, there would be like monologues of things that I would want to say to the
Mm.
doctor. And then he comes in and it's like that ancient spell of a man in a white robe, like in front of you. And you're just like,
Whoa.
oh, I've like forgotten like truly everything I wanted to say to stand up for myself. And you get maybe 10% of it out. But I was like, I'm like a pretty, I don't know, strong person, a pretty articulate communicator. And I was like shocked at how dumb I became in the presence of someone that was really necessary and vital for my dad's health, but also that knew a lot,
Yeah.
and ultimately ended up putting my dad in some pretty precarious medical situations. But that's for
Mm.
another time. But that's kind of where it comes from me, is just, oh, we're all equally just trying to figure this shit out.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think you brought up something really interesting about the man in the white robes.
Mm-hmm.
Because that has been connected in a lot of different memories and experiences that I've had in the last like maybe 2 years, as I've kind of
Interesting.
like started to remember certain things that I think it's like not advantageous for certain groups for people to start remembering, you know?
Yeah, we can go back on that. That's a whole other topic right there. Yeah.
We're gonna have like
Recall.
50 podcasts and then still be like, so anyway,
Yeah,
you'll have more to say.
more to say, more to look forward to.
Right,
But the white
totally.
coats.
The white coats. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of that in my memories of like resets or inquisitions and stuff like that. And I think that, yeah, like it's important, and arguably one of the most important things that can be done is to actually like open up like portals of communication with like-minded individuals in a way that like other people can hear, because then it's like, okay, it's not just me having these thoughts. I'm not an island, you know, like. And I don't know, I just think in a time of like quote unquote great change, like it's really healthy and helpful to be able to relate to one another and to have, you know, a deeper level of connection or communication around like some of the challenging issues and how they relate to our lives and shit like that. So
I was just meeting with Emily and Eric from Emily Moyer. If anyone listens, she's great. And
mm,
we were just talking about kind of well, I was talking about how she's been world building, because before there
okay.
was Project Kids Cafe, this thing that she kind of started, I was having no one to talk about all this stuff with. And maybe I could go off a little bit with people, but they didn't really receive it.
Yeah.
And they definitely didn't contribute back at like an equal, or like in the same way that we're on like, oh, we understand all these things about the world.
Right.
And so, and being able to talk more and more with other people, my voice strengthens, my communication strengthens. Now I'm reaching out to you, now I'm reaching out to other people in the community, and now it's like everyone, and there's probably about like 5 other people that I can think of that are kind of on that same wavelength. And so it's like truly, the more we talk about stuff, it like does create worlds, it creates dimensions, because now
Yes.
there's a lot more strength behind this movement than there was even 10 years ago. And from what I understand from listening just like randomly to an old recording of Boots on the Ground with some friends of ours, the community was not in such a good spot even just a few years ago, due to
Right.
lots of like mistrust, which makes sense in this group, right? Because
Yeah.
we're all here for a reason. But it's been neat now that like fame and attention and money have sort of kind of just gone to the wayside. People are just really attracted to good information,
Yeah.
and people are just really interested in supporting other people where like the signal is boosted. And I'm telling you, I don't care like what anyone's beliefs are, as long as we like agree on some very, we're like pro-human, basically
Yeah.
pro-human in nature and their oneness. And that's where I am. If you can meet me there, then let's talk.
Absolutely. And I think also like one thing you said, something really key, that humans and nature are like one and the same. So when you disconnect one from the other, like you can expect chaos to ensue. You can expect the unnatural from like
As
to
far
arise.
as I know, Mare, like the word sin, I think, means separation from God. And it's like, if we
Mhm.
consider nature to be like, I don't know, our mechanism, our understanding of God in this place,
Yeah.
then like to separate, it's like they're trying to like recreate the original sin, which is like, I guess when people have been talking about this for a while, but I'd never thought about it in these terms of like, they are truly trying to separate us from that. And that means not to get hot button, but like your immune system, your thinking, all that. I mean,
Yeah.
really, your thinking comes together. It doesn't matter how disparate you are once you start considering the wholeness of nature and how nature and cycles and astrology and all that stuff kind of come together and play. And I
Totally.
think the more you remove people from that, you can, and you create like, I don't know, godless people, which is, I know,
Mhm.
like a huge thing that is a program that's always in the background running.
Right.
You can make people think that you're the God, you know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
you're the savior. And that's, I think, the main, that's, I think, what the gold pill in me sniffs out about bullshit.
Oh no, totally. Like I think that if you, because everybody has like a very different understanding of like what God is, and
Absolutely.
we can actually get into that and unpack that in a little bit if you'd like. I know that's like a really like weighty topic to kind of like, but I think it's also an important topic. And like, I want to normalize talking about all the things, including the things that maybe, aren't as like, open, like dinner conversation, to talk about. Um,
You want some not political correct stuff, but not in the classical sense, just in
right.
the, it's okay to be uncomfortable because we all think these things anyways, so we're just voicing it.
Yes. And I
Yeah,
think that, like, so from my perspective, as somebody who considers myself to be a mystic, which does put God or whatever that force is in a different framework than perhaps somebody who is like in a more dogmatic type of religious
absolutely.
institution. Like, I can kind of, from my framework of where I'm operating from, I could see how, creating like, or running the godless frequency, whatever that is, however that's like being done, kind of like disempowering people to have faith in their imagination and to have like faith in their creative abilities, which like that kind of brings me to another thing. And I'm sorry, I'm like just going on now, like,
Girl,
but
let's go off. Go on.
okay, but like where like the creative abilities and the imagination and all of that stuff, and also, whatever like space is, quote unquote space, or like whatever is like that we're all connected to, that we're all part of, like whatever,
Hmm.
you know, depending on who you ask,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like that force is like arguably like that is literally what nature is. That is nature. Like, I don't think that just because people say nature, like they're necessarily always even referring to just like green plants. And like, while I love that form of nature and I'm here to like take the green pill any day, all the time, like, I don't know, it's nature is like as much in your heart as it is in a garden, as it is in a forest, as it is in animals, as it is in like, actual helpful, soul family type of like benevolent beings. Like, it's just
It's
that,
like an unfolding that's like there to occur. It's not to
yeah.
cut you off, but it reminds me, it's
Oh,
like the way. It's like the way that it goes. And it's like
yeah.
there's a human nature, there's an animal nature, and then I guess you could kind of go into spirit versus nature if you wanted to, but the nature of people is a really interesting thing to behold. And
Yeah.
that's a big piece of the gold pill, I think, as well.
Well,
It's a little
totally.
morsel.
And I think that a lot of the ways that we would think of like, okay, like human nature, what you
Hmm.
or I might like look around at this time and observe as human nature, like, which, I mean, based on the last several hundred years, would probably be like war and like fear and fighting and like just, like not necessarily always, but there is that
Hmm.
kind of like threat of like violence and separation or sin, as you like articulately pointed out earlier, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I would almost argue that like the original sin, and I'm putting that in quotations, like
I get it. Yeah.
would be like that, like whenever humans decided to like allow that like first savior, or like this sort of like imprinting that we allowed because we didn't want to deal with the repercussions of our actions. That's kind of how I see it, like in terms of like the biblical quote unquote fall, or like
Yeah.
the fall
Yeah.
of like, that is something that like I think we agreed to like experience in some senses, you know.
Yeah. There's a
And
really cool example of like, it's a really like, artistic way that maybe we can kind of tag it on at the end,
mhm,
but it's from Hedwig and the Angry Inch, and it's like him talking about the origin of love, and it kind of goes into all like the Greek, it goes into like everything, but it basically talks about a time when we were one thing, and then I think Zeus comes out and splits us into two, and so that's when we become separated, and then the
right.
whole point of like is finding ourselves again and making two pieces fit. Anyways, I don't know where I'm going with that, but I just, that visual was like, once I saw that with that concept behind it, it like unlocked something for me personally. So I recommend everyone go watch that. It's so good.
Yes. And I think that that is exactly like the kind of thing that I'm talking about. Like at one point in time, we decided to split off from an aspect of ourselves and to
Hmm.
like, you know, maybe cultivate some
Can I
amnesia.
get woo on you
Huh?
really fast? Whenever I
Yes.
think of a damnic man, I think of a damned man. And that is a man who is like damned from, separated from like whatever. And so that's what I think of as this experiment that we are currently, whatever, living through in our
Right.
incarnation, is we are separated from the grace, the harmony. It's not that you can't be reunited with these things, but these are things that you have to, I think, go through journeys and experiences to really acquire and authentically integrate into your being. And that's all I
I
have to say about that.
love, I love that because okay, like, so say this is just a knowing that I have, and like I don't expect like anyone to agree with me, but this is something that like was made pretty clear last year, like that we're on some kind of repeat, and that this could be the last repeat, you know, like that's
I
how it,
have that intuition as well, but go on. Yeah.
yeah, like that's how it feels to me. And so like, you know, there's this repeating pattern, or like repeating story, and arguably to be here right now we would have chosen like not just to do it once, but like to do it like over and over and over again.
Hmm.
So it just makes me wonder about like the actual, like from the level of the soul, not even the level of the spirit, but just from the level of the soul going through incarnations, collecting experiences, that kind of thing.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
I can't help but think that it's delicious from that perspective. Like, I don't know why. Like, I just can't help but think that like we're like lapping this up and like sending our like soul self like notes when we dream and that kind of thing. You know, it's like I just
The more that I get into a place of discomfort and maybe mentally or
yeah.
with ideas or whatever, the more I find myself like, that's where I kind of early on, I think I really liked the feeling of dread, and that has matured into the feeling
Yeah.
of mystery. And it's
Mhm.
I'm not only not okay, I mean, excuse me, I said that wrong. I'm okay with a mystery, but I'm not only okay with it, like I have an appreciation for it. And I think that a, a mystery with the big M, like in all sense
Yeah.
of the word, right? And I
The
think that the
mystery.
more people can be okay with not knowing what's going on, I think that tension right there is what drives people crazy. Like truly, I think that's what we're seeing is a lot of people for the first time in this country being confronted with this idea of tomorrow doesn't look the same as it did yesterday, and perhaps that's how every tomorrow could look. And
Right.
Tim Dillon's this really great comedian. I don't know if you know who he is. He's like
Mhm.
he was Austin based, but he has this whole thing
Mm.
about he's been talking for conspiracies for years. And then recently he kind of got some traction. He's with the tech people. And he basically said, if you had just gotten, like, for lack of a better term, red pilled overnight, like, you would break your brain. He goes, the stuff that we've been learning about for the last like 6 years, and these people are taking it in one dose. It's like that could truly, I mean, it could break a lot of things. And so that was really interesting to me to think that it's like, oh, there is this like kind of cool part to this organic waking up process, which is like you only can take in as much as you can handle, sort of to go back to when you're ready, the master will appear, sort of, whatever that form takes.
Right. Exactly.
But it's, anyways, he's really great though. That's a really good point, that it's like, this is so much information. It's so heavy, and to like carry this much weight up a hill in just one trip. I don't even want to make more than one trip, right? To like take my groceries inside the house. So, but that's like how, you know, you have to be taking this information in. It's just kind of like in little doses. Otherwise it can, make you a little unsteady.
He's right. I mean, that's kind of ish what happened to me, although I kind of like, I don't know, you know, I definitely like had, you know, periods of waking up prior to 2020, where like, but I was always funneled into like a different trap, you know, like the yoga community or the new age community. And there's a lot of traps within like some of those communities. Like I felt like in looking back on it, I could honestly say that like the organic unfolding of like my own awakening, which like has not always looked pretty, and like more recently has looked like remembering a lot of inconvenient shit, you know?
Yeah.
Like like it just feels like that process was kind of like hijacked by the new age because of a lot of, and I always like to come back to that there's like truth in everything and there's lies in
everything. Absolutely.
As like a guiding pillar, but some of those teachings I think are like kind of almost designed to prevent any like memory recall that's actually like substantial, that like, or, you know, actual like mystical gnosis experiences that are a bit deeper and like more esoteric.
I think I've just been really lucky in that I've kind of like been a loner. I mean, I've had like friends and stuff, obviously, but so much of my like adult life is, I live in like a college town, and I'm older than that, but we have a lot of very similar thinking. And I've just kind of always been on the outside. So I've never really felt like, oh, this is my group, I belong here. And so I guess in that way, I've always found like charisma to be sort of red flaggy. Yeah. And like, I've always been, especially in the people who like in this community early on, where you could really tell who wanted to help you and who didn't, because some people were just trying to get you in their fold and like get their numbers up and, you know, believe what I believe. And then some people, like, this would always be the hallmark of someone that I wanted to trust, would say like, look into it for yourself. Like if they didn't say that at the end, or, you know, like kind of regularly to remind you that it's in you, like then I was like, oh, this person's probably not for me. My first time though of going through the gauntlet was with some of like the alien stuff, and I felt so fucking dumb. Sorry if you can't say that. I felt so dumb after like going, and I didn't like go, it was like a very accelerated, like I think maybe 2 weeks of really just buying into some BS, and then like realizing super quickly how just like it was the first time I gained awareness of myself, like from the outside, like really being taken advantage of. And I was just like, okay, here we go. So this was like a nice crash course in what to look out for. And then I was even able to kind of go through some of the, I forgot what it's called. It's like it was some guy over in the UK. He had a lot of like really neat stuff. It was not Project Camelot. That was like an operation. I think it still had good stuff, but it was not. But there was another one where it was like, I just started realizing like you, that all these people may not be like exactly what they say they are, but I'm going to know that with my spiritual armor and kind of go in and like discern like what is good here and what is kind of put in here to throw me off the scent, you know? And then once I was able to get a really good understanding of what I was looking for, the spirit of what I was looking for, it all just kind of became a lot easier. But God, you really do have to go through some like bizarre experiences where you kind of let your trust in other people's hands, or you kind of let your destiny, let that be up to someone else, or kind of let them project their shit on you. And then eventually you, hopefully, you know, we can get the strength to be like, that's actually you, not me. And then move on with what is you, carry on.
Oh my gosh, girl. You just said I had to grab like a notebook and like a pen, like a pen and paper, because you just said a lot of really good shit that I am happy that it's all coming up, you know, and this is exactly why I wanted to do this with you. And I'm super happy that we decided to do this. So the first thing that you said was that I picked out was charisma. And like the charisma of a spiritual personality, or like a spiritual teacher, or something like that. And I wanted to tie that into like algorithms, because I think a lot of like what the gold pill serves to do is it kind of, I see it like visually as like, it breaks apart the algorithms, it like demystifies and de-occults and like makes illuminated, you know, so that's kind of like the ethos, I guess, behind it.
Yes.
So in astrology, there's a fixed star called Algol, and Algol, it's like Medusa, it's connected to Medusa, and in theory, I guess Algol like represents, well, it's connected phonetically to Al-Ghul, like, which is the spirit of alcohol, the spirit.
It's the whole related to like the beheading stuff, right?
Yes.
Yes, alcohol. Okay, go ahead. I just wanted to make sure I'm on the same wavelength. Okay,
you are, girl, as usual, like on the same wavelength for sure. But like that, so that is connected to spiritual decapitation. Like the beheading.
Wow.
In that case, right? So in that event, like kind of looking through this with a goal, looking through at charisma from a gold pill lens is kind of like looking at people's numbers and like whose numbers increase dramatically overnight. Like if you have the eyes to see, you can kind of like, and like you can visually look into seeing like who's maybe being propped up by what, you know, like is all I'm saying.
Yeah. It's kind of all you see. Yeah. At some
like,
point. Yeah.
A primary example of that for me, I'm going to go ahead and like talk a little bit of shit, you know, because
you name the name, sister. No, I'm
going to name the name, you know. One person that I think of within regard to this is Elizabeth April.
Okay, I'm not familiar, but I want to be, so go ahead.
Sure. So, you know, I come from like New Age communities. So, of course, everybody's always sending me this about this being and like what they're saying and this and that, right? And so Elizabeth April, quote unquote, channels the Galactic Federation of Light, which like I kind of like haven't really ever felt drawn toward like channeling of extraterrestrials or interdimensionals. To me, like my inner kind of like what you also said, you brought up a good point about discernment and kind of like feeling into like, is this a contract that I actually want to make? Because people were trying to get me to do that whenever like I was involved in more new age circles, and that's a contract. You're letting another being like literally into your body and like into your energy field, and then they kind of have access to you whenever, like after that, if they want to.
Yeah.
So Elizabeth April, whenever the panini or the panorama, I'm trying to like code, right? Whenever that really like started, she had a video that went completely viral, and it was about how the pedos were going to be taken out, and like, you know, just but there were some like glimpses of truth in there that like there's something different.
That's how they keep you. That's how they keep you. They want you to see the little things, and they like to. This is something Emily was really good at pointing out. I don't remember what we were talking about, but basically, I think she was talking about how Zero Hedge and what Zero Hedge does is take articles that are kind of aggregated from around the internet that are sort of spicy, and they'll maybe be really good points, and then there will be some random ass fact about some pedophilia, and it's like, let's be real. At this point, we all know that's probably how a lot of us got we got brought into the game, either as people who like understand that's a reality or like as survivors, right?
Right.
So they put that in there, and it's obvious. It's something that serves to bring you off topic, although it is related. But to an average person you're talking to, it's so unrelated, and it also kind of like dampens the conversation with someone else because no one really wants to receive information from you, no matter how good it is, if it's kind of like got that information tapped into it. So what Zero Hedge would do, Emily said, was they would go and they would just get the meat of the article and leave out the stuff that would confuse people. And I started realizing, oh, that's what like some of the people, some operations that are working in this community do, is they try to give you really good stuff. And then they'll put some like abstract piece of information that's like either spiritual woo-woo, which may be totally true, but just loses the average person.
Right.
Not to go back to Tim Dillon again, but he talks about it like, you don't have to talk about these like satanic pedophiles. You can talk as like they're spiritual ills. You can talk about these people with the things they actually do in the real world, and they're terrible. And it's probably just as bad, if not worse, but because it's like the whole Pizzagate conspiracy psyop is wrapped up with all that, it's like all of a sudden you bring up something that has to do with collusion in the government, and like within 2 sentences, if you're not careful and you're in trafficking in that material, you're talking about like unrelated pedophilia, John Podesta, like things that are like, sure, they're important, but we are burying the real meat, right? With these salacious things that people get sidetracked on. And it's so interesting to watch it occur in real time now that like I'm aware of it, because it's all happened so fast. It used to be rolled out a lot more slowly, and now it's just like phew. So it's like, yeah, you got to have your thing. So that's interesting what you're saying. Go ahead though.
No, yeah, like I think that that's really relevant. And like one of the things that she did say that was like enough to like, it's one of those truisms that like I do feel for this time, which is that like manifestation or the likes of such things, synchronicity, is exploding an instant, because it is like, and that was something that like I could connect to that she said. But she also like has been really like into the whole like that in the fifth dimension it's just unity consciousness, and like no, there's no polarity there, which like personally I don't think that that's true. I think that there is polarity in the fifth dimension, and it's just like a different type of polarity than what like this like drama, like, you know, epic fucking polarity that we have here.
Thought experiment really fast. Imagine a world where it's all unity and there's no difference. It would be so awful. In fact, that's what they're trying to create. So it's like this idea that we look at polarity as bad. Like there's polarity is not bad. Duality is the issue, right? Polarity is fucking what it is. It exists. Yeah. And so this idea that we have to like have odds with, it's just like, it's unity in my understanding of it, in my gold pill understanding. It's like the umbrella that encompasses everything, right? Yeah. And
you're muted. Hang on.
Am I back?
How weird is that?
My phone just like rang with some random number.
Oh, okay, cool. I was like, you're muted.
Where did she go?
That's so funny.
Sucked up. yeah. I just think about how these words get used against us, or like when Biden, who, you know, whatever, blah blah. He was talking about unity was like his whole thing, and my mom, who really likes Biden, or who did, she was like, yeah, you need unity, that's what this country needs. And I was like, okay, I get it, but okay, so here's counterfeit and real.
Yes.
The counterfeit, the real version of unity is we all just like exist, which is what it is. It's like there's sometimes violence and there's sometimes disagreement. That's unity. Okay, I hate to break it to people. The counterfeit version of unity, what they're trying to propose, is a forced, this is what we all do because I said so, and good luck trying to veer out of our unity because we're united. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe then we can unpack some of that, like the counterfeit versus the real, and like what we are like speaking of when we talk about that. Like, before we get into that though, I'm sorry to derail that thought. I'll come back to it though. I'm going to write it on my notepad.
Love a derailment.
You know, we love it. We love it. Okay, I'm going to write it on my notepad. Da-da-da-da. Okay, so you brought up another thing with regard to like edging into like spiritual communities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really important, and it brings up a couple of different like kind of offshoots for me, which is like the seeking of belonging. And how that can be like a really big culprit in terms of like getting sucked up into that. Like, I guess that you were like born like a freaking like, you know, free thinking goddess who like does not need like, but for me, like the seeking of belonging and like the feeling of like maybe being a black sheep or like being quote unquote different or like whatever that is, like that kind of like feeling like an alien kind of energy. I think, you know, it can be so like initially like bonding and healing to connect with people who are on like a similar or same wavelength. But then where I get into with that is the like propensity for trauma bonding. And I get into as well, like with some of, I've read both of Eve Lorgan's books about like interdimensional interference in relationships, which is another thing that I think you brought up, like an alien interference moment that you had, and where you were just aware that like there was something intervening or interfering with your space, just from the sounds of it. And you can get into that if you want, but like, but I just, I think tying all of that in, you know, there can be such a strong, and I guess I'm saying this from experience at this point, because I was kind of in this energy a little bit last year, that like the desire to belong and to be seen in some of the like recognitions and realizations that you've had can often also make us food, you know, and kind of like
anything. And I'm a total whenever I talk about stuff like this, it's not like I'm not subject to it too, right?
Totally.
I love a good ego moment. I love it when I feel good about myself. I love it when people tell me I'm doing so. I'm not like immune to it, but I do try to be careful when it's kind of like an outside energy, whether it's a material or interdimensional, whatever. And I try to just be really careful as to like, why am I being gassed up right now? Like, and then I try to go, oh, they don't know, oh, because sometimes I'm like, yeah, that's good, right? Like I did something good. And other times it's like, oh, you just really want me to join, or you really want me to whatever, or I just try to figure out what their desires are. And sometimes there's like ways that I can work around that and we can still whatever. But normally I'm just, I'm very hesitant to invite that kind of energy in, just because it's not really for me.
Yeah. And so apparently, according to myself, healing addictions is gold pill shit, like for real. And in one of the 12-step programs that I've worked, there's a truism that suggests that it's like mind your motives. And I think that that's really important. And if you have the gift of being able to sense into people a little bit, you know, to kind of like, I don't know, what I've kind of grown to see as kind of like, this is probably going to sound crazy to some, but like merging with something or a situation or an opportunity that's presented itself or whatever, like merging with it, getting the data and information or whatever that I need from it, and then just kind of pulling away. It's like, zoop, zoop, you know, it can be quick and it doesn't have to be like all dramatic, and you don't have to like absorb whatever it is, you know,
well,
but
that's
like
a healed person going into that experience versus a raw person going into that experience. You know what I mean? Like having the skill to navigate it is a gold pill healed moment if I ever did hear one.
Yeah, I think that you can kind of glean though, like people's motivations and intentions. And I think in a time of like that I would consider to be like high deception, it's good to be able to really like flex that muscle and to kind of stand unabashedly in our own like mysticism and magic right now feels like the most like beneficial thing, like for myself, for you, for other, like that I could do.
Yeah, just getting to know my own language, like getting into my body to know like how it like I truly have been practicing like I'm not like a yoga person, I'm a Pilates person, but
Sure.
I did it the wrong way for a long time where I like wasn't like knitting my ribs, and I gave myself an injury. And it's really interesting. And I was like, oh no, I should never do it again. And then I got back into it. And ever since I restarted, it's like, I'm really in my body now. And like my alignment is, I can feel how things are aligning. And so that's been really cool. I don't even know where I was going with that, but get in your body is what I'm saying, because you'll start noticing just little things are off, or this is like a terrible example, but like police officers and stuff that are investigating and like they're doing interrogations. It's always interesting to see. They like to let other people talk more than them, you know, like just those learning little things here and there, or like establishing a baseline of activity for people, or like what normal people or what a person in this situation would normally act like and want of me. And then just trying to like, I kind of do that intuitively now. I realized it's something I've been able to build up over time. It's just like what this situation should feel like if it was going like the way that felt right, and then what it's feeling like now. So that's how I kind of gauge it. I sort of have like the pillar of reality, which is like the one that I try to be married to, and then like see how other people veer off of that beaten path accordingly, using comparisons and contrasting. Yeah,
makes total sense. Wow, yeah, so I'm sure you're surprised that I have a lot of things to say to what you just said. It's funny. Yeah, the body can be a pendulum, and I think that the body is like a really critical piece of like what we're going through and what we're experiencing right now. You know, whether like you want to like, because for me, I've been tracking the plasma discharges and the solar activity and like the Schumann resonance and just things of that nature, right? I've been kind of tracking those things, and like I've been observing that, contrasting it with like kind of how I'm doing and like what's going on with me. And one thing that I think that the body, like this, you know, fucking frail, fucked up avatar body that we're in, like a copy of a fucking copy, in my opinion, no offense to this body, but it still has, like I know, and it still at the same time does so much to like keep us moving, and it's where our like spirit and our soul chooses to, this is where it's at, this is where it's occupying, you know. And so I'm gonna go ahead and like tell a mushy like personal story where like when I was 16, I was very like in a very eating disordered type of space, like really bad, to where like I'm pretty sure that I was like headed into like just really not good places. It was really thin. So like I think that what was happening was, because I look at everything like a spiritual problem, you know, like body problem or otherwise, you know. So I was in this space where like I just like did not want to be in my body. Like that's kind of what like the message of all that is. I just wanted to be like a floating head, and like, you know, so in that process of like going to yoga for the first time, and like, you know, took me like 2 years to actually like going to yoga. I hated it and resented it, and it brought up a lot for me, because like the further and further down I went into my body, the more like my soul and my spirit like actually occupied my body, the more pain, right? Because when you start to turn on the gold pill, you know, it's like, and when you start to really like generate a certain type of spiritual warmth, perhaps that does have to burn through a lot of pain, and a lot of shadow stuff comes up. And, you know, it took me like 8 yoga classes to stay the whole time. Like I left early for 8 times and I was like, fuck this, I hate this, you know, and then I don't know, I think eventually like the movement with breath, I mean, that's still that is a pillar of my well-being, like to this very day is like.
Is it a golden pillar?
It's a golden pillar, yes. All I need to do to remind myself of my capacity to handle anything that comes my way and to be able to like have no fear and to thrive and like in any environment, like where like to bloom where I'm planted. Like if there's anything that like activates that in me, it's like yoga and like movement and sound. So anyway, I think as
the eating disorder piece is interesting because I think I know a lot of girls deal with that, and I know the internet is taking a lot of shit for that, and I understand why, because it's a space where you don't actually exist. Yeah. And so I had like a little dance back in the early 2000s with the old media culture, and when looking back on that, I think you have a very interesting take, but I took from it the spirit of me getting to meet the spirit of less or of not or of no, and that's what she was to me, because I didn't get like super into it, but it was the spirit of immaterial, don't be material, which is interesting because the internet was like really taken off at that, which again is this idea of, you know, don't be material, like you're a carbon footprint, you know what I mean? Like, right. You get reduced down to like what your material is and how terrible it is. And so it's like, obviously combine that with the fact that like, you know, I'm 40. So like 90s when I was like really growing up when like my 13, 14-year-old self, that was heroin chic and like Kate Moss and like, truly, the style was to be so drugged out and emaciated that you could fit into the clothes. And I wasn't spiritually sound then, so that seemed like a real good idea to me and a real good attainable thing for me. So I just look at it as like, back in the day, that was more my experience and my knowledge with the spirit of no and less and going without. But that's coming from a person who no longer struggles with those things. So that could just be, you know what I mean? But when you're in it, and it's very real and very material when you're in it, and it's very dangerous. So, I mean. Absolutely. Gosh, that's so like, I don't know if you can tell based on my face. So this recording is just the audio recording, but we are like face to face right now just because like, I don't know. We were talking about how it's easier to talk to a human person. But imagine it being easier to talk to a person. I know, right? I know. It's so stupid. Anyways. But no, like you saying that, like the spirit of no, the spirit of less, the spirit of not much, the spirit of like, okay, so as you're saying that, like restriction. There you go. Sorry, go ahead. Like Saturnian, very Saturnian. Oh my gosh. You saying that like kind of knocked the wind, like it like knocked the wind out of me, and like in a way that I think is awesome, because that totally encapsulates like where I was at that time, like just very much like there's a whole thing, right, with the whole Saturn Jupiter dance of like constriction and taking up space, expansion, constriction and expansion. And there's a whole dance with that. But like, man, when I was in that space, it was very much about, there's also a denial, self-denial, a denial of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, you know, and a like, I guess, a shrinking mechanism. And I would say that like, there's a time to shrink, there's a time to compress, there's a time to expand, whatever. And like, I think that, it's really, you saying that does actually put a lot of like personal pieces together for me, like in the way of the dance with Anna and Mia, right? Like and the internet too. I mean, that's a really, really great point. It is. What year was that? Because we're about 10 years apart, and I was in my early 20s, so that might have been around the same time. Like that was when I was Zanga Journals. I'm 40. Okay. I am old, but that's okay. I like my experience. Well, a lot of people that I've met in the last year have been
like exactly 40. Like they're like like in the same, like the very same year, the very same age range. And there's a couple of interesting like astrological connections with that, but I don't know what you just said. I'm sorry. I was just like, huh, what a coinky
I was just thinking about how until we were talking, I had never considered the Saturnian nature of the internet and of the control, because the whole thing of the internet, really, if we look at the Internet of Things and bodies, and my understanding of it is we're trying to, I look at it as like the 666 energy of like, and again, it's this godless energy of like, there is no other outside force. I can control it all. If only I was in charge, it would be okay.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's interesting that like probably right about that time was right when like MySpace and social media really started like gaining speed and traction. And like this idea of like girls, and I guess it's still happening now, which would make sense. It would be like revving up now because the whole thing is revving up now. So why wouldn't girls be in touch with this idea of constriction and or of retention or of control? Basically, it just makes a lot of sense. Like I guess in the mundane astrological part of it all, it's just interesting to see how that works out. But I didn't think about that till now.
You just said a whole lot of stuff that I want to like kind of parse apart, especially the Saturn symbolism, just in case like anyone listening doesn't know about that, because I think that that's like a really interesting place to go, just considering that Saturn is very much like whatever that is, has very much like a strong hand in like our world right now and like what's going on with it and where we're going. So
Saturn really conjures to mind the meme of govern me harder daddy. Like it really does. Like
the govern me harder daddy. Oh totally.
Yes, I feel like that's like, but go ahead, because I know you're the astrological mystic.
Oh, not even like I'm not even like coming at it from there. I'm more coming at it from like a symbolism will be their downfall kind of place, where like a lot of so arguably literally everything that's happened for the last 2 years could be like seen as like a Saturnine type of ritual, right? So
a gripped fist.
Yes, absolutely. The boot,
which is actually really funny. Just going on that is like the BLM, sort of the counterfeit of the BLM, right? Like that whole symbolism, and it's being used. It's a gripped fist,
right? And there's also like there's a lot of symbolism that connects into that, like, and then we can like branch off into the counterfeit versus the real and kind of like how that shows up. But like, so I just want to talk about Saturn for a second, because I've been in my Saturn return, and it's kind of funny that like the world feels like it's going through its Saturn return right now as I go through, and it's interesting, like the world shatters, I shatter. Like I have a lot of like very collective, like
you're part of the Aeon, sister. It's just what it is.
Part of the Aeon, right? So like so the internet is also on its Saturn return, which means like more restrictions, more regulations. Kind of makes sense with, like, all of the censorship and like with metaverse and like the new internet, or like the internet of bodies and things like you were talking about. So I just want to validate that like that definitely shows up in the astrology. But the other thing that I wanted to share is about like you brought up the 666 energy, and like I just want to kind of like take some like duality out of that, or like take some polarity out of that.
Please,
like,
please.
Just in case, like, I don't know, just because it feels like a good thing to do. So so the idea behind that is that like on Saturn, allegedly, the pictures that we see that may or may not be CGI of Saturn, there's literally like a hexagram. So like the symbolism
it
of
like
Saturn
pumps out hexagrams, doesn't it? Isn't like I've seen it like literally its signal is like I remember tripping out on this like years ago, being like, what?
So, and there's a couple of other pieces with Saturn that I would like to kind of like bring out, which is that Saturn is connected to time. So, you know, arguably a lot of like the hex symbolism or the black cube symbolism that we've been kind of like watching increase over the last like 2 years is connected to time, is connected to a certain, I would call it like white people time.
Sure, the Gregorian calendar. What a great way to call it. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that gets back to like in 1582 and 83. That's when the Gregorian calendar was introduced to humans. That's also the last time that Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto were connected in Capricorn, which is exactly the aspect that we had last year.
Wow.
So time falls apart, right? And
Okay.
then suddenly there's like a risk of losing the farm, so to speak. This is just my theory.
Right.
So this is why there's all this like Saturn ritual worship, even if people don't even know that that's what they're doing. Like they don't really have to know, you know what I mean?
Okay.
Like,
Yeah.
so, and it's a spell of authority. It's a spell into time. It's like a whole thing, right? And so I just wanted to just really like,
if we go into that, okay, the Saturnian energy, the end of time, and we also go into restriction and the spirit of Anna and Mia. And then we also now couple, I'm not sure if you're with the Met Gala, but Nish talked about it a little bit, Kim Kardashian's costume.
yes.
Her black, and so I kind of see her as this like black goddess energy, and I'm wondering if that's how we are trying to connect. That's part one. Are we trying to connect to Saturn in some way there? But also, Kim Kardashian, the week after the Met Gala, was on SNL, and she did a sketch. Oh my gosh, it's not going to come to me. Oh God. It's basically like she is the Bachelor, and the joke in the Bachelor is like, I give you my rose if I want you to stay around. And all these like celebrities are there playing themselves. And then this guy, and I can't remember his name, but he is played by like the nerdy guy on the show, Kyle Mooney.
Mhm.
And his name, basically, I looked it up because I was like, this is such a weird sketch, because he was the only one with a character name. So I looked up the character name, and it meant something like God's strength. And the only character that Kim Kardashian playing herself as the Bachelorette rejected was God's strength, his character. And I thought it was very interesting that she's kind of the avatar for this like digital Anna woman, or like this unattainable like digital thing. And so I've been playing with that. And then also you play with this like who did the musical guest? It was Halsey, and Halsey's that same week Kim Kardashian was on SNL, and Halsey's whole vibe on her new album is like dark goddess energy. She's a recent new mother. I don't like follow these people, but they're like, they're moving players. You know what I mean? I like to see what their like archetypes are doing. But this dark mother, this dark energy archetype has been everywhere. And I'm like, all of this shit is set up to worship this. And I can't help but think it has to do with Saturn. Meredith, take it away.
Oh my God.
I either just broke someone or I made someone's day. I don't know.
Okay, just to give you like what's going on inside of my brain right now is like the friend equivalent of like an orgasm. Like,
love.
So I know, so it's a meant to be. Okay, so I want to unpack like literally everything. Let's circle back, Sally, around a lot of what the fuck you just said, because oh my gosh. Okay, so there's several things. So I am very familiar with dark goddess energy.
Yes.
And in my astrology chart, which at a certain point in time, maybe like several phases of consciousness in my life ago, I really like took on my astrology chart as fact, right? And also, you know, we could like tease apart like whether or not this experience was real or not or whatever. Speaking of like the hazy lines between the real and the counterfeit, even in the old world, you know, like I had like Lilith appear to me like several times, you know what I mean? And so like that signature is really prominent for me, and it's very like, it's feral, it's very like, it can be wounded and very like it's like a sexual misery type of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That whole experience of like the dark goddess and the dark feminine, and how that's kind of like,
Mm-hmm.
I equate that to that energy as someone who's done a lot of work and, you know, continues to do work to kind of invert
Sure.
the inversions within myself that I see,
Yeah.
which is a very gold pill action, you know?
Yeah.
But I see that energy as like kind of relating it back to the digital space, like Lucy. In the movie
Yes.
Lucy, it like spills out over into everything. It's very like, it has no boundaries. It's very, and I mean, yeah, like the consciousness behind whatever like this AI is, like has been said by several people to have like a feminine sort of energy, right?
Okay.
So
Yes.
it's like there's a lot of women from my observation who have like really fallen into the goddess type of
Ego. Yeah.
if it's a very, it's like it's why I can't like fuck with feminism anymore. Basically, it's like the like, it's very wounded, swampy, feminine, and that energy right there is actually running the show. And Capricorn and Saturn is feminine. It's not masculine.
Beyonce
And take it away.
did say it best when she said girls run the world, and she said my persuasion can build a nation, endless power, your love I will devour. Okay, she was not fucking playing around. And so like,
Right.
if you don't think for 1 second this whole, I get where the impetus for feminism is. There's a lot of inequality. I don't fuck with feminism because I can't be put into a box. Like, of course I believe that men and women should be equal. Like, duh. Anyway.
Hello,
But,
that's like the most basic line of thought possible.
I don't need to be called something. In fact, I'm like embarrassed that you feel the need to like separate yourself as like a human being for thinking some very basic thoughts. Anyway, but you know what? Go on, the movement's great. Like it's getting a little out of hand, but like if that's like your drum to beat, then like go for it. But
Nice.
Feminism is this idea that like women aren't in charge is such a disempowering notion. And in fact, they are so in charge that they have to like, they have this bazillion years or like whatever time is like campaign of telling women that like they're nothing. And it's like, yeah, there might be like some aspects to like why women believe that because of like the current landscape and civilization and all that. But ultimately women are like fucking really powerful. And if you think about it, at the end of the day, like I know it does take a man and a woman to make a baby, right? But a woman is the house of that. Okay. And it's like,
yes.
And I know that like they can do it in test tubes and stuff, but okay. So before I get off, I wanted to, the dark and the counterfeit and the real. There is this real dark feminine energy, and I don't know what I would call like the real version Lilith, and that's the real thing that's here that people should not be afraid of, but they should. I understand why people are afraid of it, but I understand. I know what you're talking. But then there's the Sophia dark mother energy, which is the counterfeit, which is the AI, and it's like they're both here, but they do not want you getting in touch with that Lilith or whatever we want to call it energy. They want you in touch with Sophia because that's when why grip 666. It's under their control. You're under their thumb in that. So that's how I feel. That's where it ultimately gets back to the real and the counterfeit. All this counterfeit stuff has lots of like glitz and glam, and they have like tons of celebrities and songs. And I think Taylor Swift's whole album is like basically like her last one, you know, like the big one, the Look What You Made Me Do, all that kind of stuff. That was all about that Sophia energy. That song, Are You Ready for It? And I've noticed all these pop stars lately, they start out talking about the real thing. Maybe 8 years ago, they're talking about the real thing, the spirit, the thing that's inside of you. And then they get bought up. And whether they realize it or not, all of a sudden, all their shit gets super dark, super techy, super AI, super about like the metaverse, whatever. You know, thanks Facebook for fucking taking the word meta away from us.
Oh
I'm
my gosh,
reclaiming it.
Yeah, like
I reclaim it, but yeah.
Right.
That was a lot. Sorry, but that's
you're
just
good.
Like, okay.
No, I think that like the gold pill is okay being a lot and like being too much. Like I think that like I'm not sure if like Lilith is the name that I would necessarily give.
I don't know. Yeah. But you know what
There's-
I'm saying.
There is a divine feminine aspect that exists. Literally, it could even be wired into these avatars and exist as part of every person, you know,
Right.
irrespective of whether like whatever you choose, you know. But like,
Let's call her Eve. That's what I'll call her, because I know it's
aw,
biblical, but like it's your companion. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Like it's
the soft and like yielding and like truly feminine aspect. I think everybody has the ability to get in touch with that, and I think that
absolutely. Especially now. That's the
yes,
thing, is it's more accessible now than ever. And then I don't even, yeah, that's my ultimate thing. That is, get in touch with that, because and if you get in touch with the AI stuff, that's fine too. No shade in the game, but like just it's the gold pill is knowing that exists in you, for me.
oh totally. And like so I would say that like whenever like there is like a pure representation of whatever that Eve consciousness that we're talking about is like in a person, the like counterfeit lady kind of like sees that and is like
designed by a man.
Right. And I know. And there's that like there is that
I know what you're saying.
That kind of tension between those two, like that's a duality I think that we all have to reconcile with if we are like, if we do identify with any of what we're like talking about, you know, it's like we have to kind of. So for me, like the way that manifested was like just constant, like not the attention that I actually wanted, but like just constant like derogatory attention. And until I kind of like undid some of those, I don't know, like I took apart some of the templates or like however you want to, you know, say what I was doing, like until that happened, I really like a lot of my belief system and like what I was putting my energy towards was not necessarily like what I wanted. It was more like it was being funneled into something that like is not something that I like, you know what I mean? It's like a black cube that collects your energy when you like siphon, right, exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting. I'm not like, look, I have this really bizarre thing that's like built into me where I cannot like actually take in a system. Like I can try to get the understanding of it. But one of the things about magic, so this is me not taking in magic, so don't, you magicians out there, like I get it, it's much more serious than what I'm saying, but the casting of the circle is really important because it's a boundary issue, and it's about like asking the idea of like asking spirits and like entities questions is like really great, but then it's even better when it trickles down into your real world, and it's like, well, what is this person's deal, or like why is this person all of a sudden like super interested in me, or you know, like it just, what we do in the spiritual world ultimately, and how like how much we've done work there like fully trickles down into the material world.
Absolutely. And I think that what was I gonna say, like, have you noticed how like maybe people's boundaries with other human beings and their physical life can sometimes like mirror like boundaries with the spirit world or the like other realms and dimensions? Because like for myself, I have had a lot of like I've really worked on them, I think, and like done a lot of work to like repair boundaries and like set new ones that I didn't really feel comfortable at the time setting, you know, like there are like, that's a process, but like for me, I was always so like boundaryless that I felt like it's kind of like open season for people who maybe like want to take advantage, or like, you know, for people who like don't have any energy or inspiration of their own, you know, to kind of like, and the same is true, I think, for the spirit world. And that's one of those things where like we can get into the more like Ahrimanic, like scientism view of like mystical reality, like, but like the idea I think for me that I've picked up over time is like just because you're not aware that there's other dimensions that are layered on top of this one, just because you're not aware that like the spirit world exists does not mean that it is not interacting with you.
Girl, this is what I am talking about all the time. I beat this drum all the time. There is a frequency, there is a flow that is happening all the time, whether we are attentive to it or not. And really what I think like so many of this like unlocking our powers, not to like diminish what that means, is like, no, what you're doing is like progressively like wiping the sleep from your eyes, and you're just getting a better view of what's actually happening.
Yeah.
And so as far as like, I remember, and I'm really lucky, I think, because I haven't really stuck with him, but Mark Passio was a huge part of my awakening. And he's a little hard on, like, he's a little militant, but his whole idea that like the truth is just what has occurred. Yeah. And he goes, and these people have these beliefs and they act according to their beliefs. And it doesn't matter if you don't believe in them because they believe in them. And that's how their actions are. And that really drilled in me this idea of your beliefs and thoughts inform your actions. If you're built, if like you've done the work and you're like adjusted correctly in a way that that's how it flows. Because for a long time, people are broken and the flow is not there. The flow feels like it's in flow because it might flow with the matrix, but it's not your own flow. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
Until you kind of get in that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, no, I absolutely can understand that and appreciate like, yeah, just all of what you said. And also it kind of reminds me of like back in the day when I was still kind of immersed in like the new cage, you know, how I would try to use like the law of attraction, and I've always had exactly what I need when I needed it. So I don't even really have to do much of that. I realize now, like in a more like maybe quote unquote seasoned or like comfortable place within, you know, the metaphysical world. But like back in that time, I was like trying to use the law of attraction and I would get really frustrated because it's like I don't think necessarily that your thoughts create your reality, but I think it's like the ideas that you buy into, the beliefs that you hold, the agreements that you make. Like there's a lot more, there's so much more to it. It's like so complex,
I'm always
but like so simple.
I'm sorry. I just talked over you. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. But like, I'm just saying like, and I'm almost done with this thought, I promise, girl.
No,
like,
go on.
But like, I feel like it's so complex, right? In some sense, where like there's all of these things, maybe like different like little detail things that my Virgo mind loves to contemplate that like keep us from ultimately being on the same frequency as like whatever it is that like we are like trying to open up, you know? So like I think that is a key thing for me anyway. And like I had to really break apart the law of attraction, and I don't know why I started it, because it's like your beliefs and your
it's one of those beliefs that guide. Absolutely. It was really interesting to me. The law of attraction was always presented to me in a way that it's like a half truth. So there's something to it, but there's more to it. So that was one of my like early, like, oh, this idea that though, like, oh, you want to have someone move in with you, well, then don't sleep in the middle of the bed. Like those kinds of things made sense, like start altering your behavior for that. But the idea of how thoughts become things really, because I'm always looking for like a really material example of how something like metaphysical can manifest. And the idea of like, you can't create, like, let's say you can't, create a chair unless in your mind you have an understanding of like what it's going to be. And that's not saying like my mind is making that happen, but also the idea of like okay, well, I want to use my mind to have that light turned on for me across the room. And instead of the way that like we are sort of positioned and trained to think about that kind of thinking is it's magically going to happen, when in reality it's much easier to say, hey, excuse me, can you come turn that light on for me? You know what I'm saying? Like that's how it's like there's way more and I feel like sometimes in the mystical explanations of things, which I love and I totally think serve a purpose, there's like a really like concrete material way those things can be applied. And it's like, sometimes we get too heady about it. And it's like, really, it's just easier to ask the guy to come turn on, you know, like, I want my washing machine fixed. How is that going to happen? Let me talk to these entities. Sure, that might happen. And like, please tell me if it does. That's incredibly interesting. But like, ultimately, it's much easier for me to somehow figure out a way to like write some blog posts to earn some money to then pay someone to like come over and do it. I'm still using my mind. It's just in this, you know what I mean? And I think that's the kind of, those are the steps that like classically they like to remove and like kind of throw into all those texts because, or, you know, confuse in those texts, because then honestly, I don't hate it, because it does make the people who are worthy of that information that much like stronger for, you know, having to like get, you know, fight the dragon or whatever. But like, you know, it's, so I don't even like have that, like a place in my heart where I dislike things that are untrue anymore. I think they're annoying and I think I understand what they're there for, but I still, I see them as like having a purpose, and they get people like, and really the best way of like, the law of attraction, I maybe like in the early 2010s, I would have been like, I want to manifest a parking spot. And like now I feel like the law of attraction, without me wanting to manifest it, is working, where it's like you and I just started talking.
Yeah.
Like it was no anything. And it's like, we both had to like put ourselves out there and kind of like be like, you know, there were like conditions that made that attraction like possible, but ultimately we knew like was like, it wasn't like a thing, or wasn't like an issue, you know, getting to talk and stuff. And I feel like that's ultimately like the real of the law of attraction. It's like does attract like, but what kind of, and the gold pills will attract the gold pills, all you gold pills out there. So
Hey, gold pills out there.
Yes.
Yeah, no, you bring up something important. I think you brought it up earlier too, which is the like as above, so below, as within, so without. Like for me, the most effective thing that I've ever done in terms of like law of attraction stuff is like supporting my own energy field. So like learning like the ins and outs of my own energy, which is kind of like, it's interesting. Like I have a unique energy system. It's very absorbing and is like, it's interesting. It has its own quality. And I think everybody's individual energy field has its own quality. But for me, like, I think really like applying, excuse me, a daily like regimen of like hygiene and like maintenance to make sure that like I was clear-ish, like to attend to life like in a way where more of my spirit could occupy my body, like that.
First, I need to have, like, when I was going through that, I needed to have a light, right, that I was attracted to know that there was something better out there than like what I was currently experiencing. And then once I was able to establish that, then it was like, how do I address these things? And so much of being able to talk to people about really uncomfortable things and having them maybe look at you weird. And I understand that can manifest in some pretty odd ways, but it kind of just strengthens you to be like, okay, well, I have a resolve and I am a person who I am. And ultimately other people can choose to like be on board or not be on board. But like, that's like also a boundary setting thing of like, it's not like I don't want to hear negative things about me. If it's, and honestly, I'm open to it. It's just that I know what to take and what not to take, because I know the things like that are true about me that are bad, and you can't really hurt me with those. And those are things that I work on, you know what I mean? And the things that are true about me that are that people might say that are not true about me, since I know what's true, I know that's easy to just like, that's on them, or you know what I mean? It's much easier to just not carry other people's bullshit around as my own once I am certain of, as certain as I can be every day, growing more certain, you know, of myself. So
100%. I'm
spent. Do you need a cigarette? No, I'm just kidding.
I know, right? Oh my gosh. Well, no, I think I'm just about at my like synchronicity limit for the day. It was super, like my day earlier was super synchronistic too, and I was like, fuck, like I'm so tired. Like sometimes the synchro machine gets going and then you're like, fuck, I'm tired, you know, synchro fatigue.
Lon Milo Duquette, he's a a Crowley magician, but he says like sometimes the best thing to do is just turn it off. Like just tell it no. It's they in that system they call it your HGA, like your holy guardian angel.
Yeah.
But it's basically that same like that like Eve conscious or whatever. We'll figure out a better way to describe it. But that thing that's like constantly like giving you back like the sacros and stuff.
Yeah.
He says sometimes you just have to like truly just be like, I'm just gonna for a few days and I'll start being like, I just need to take a minute and I'll start doing some really dumb stuff around the house. And then a few days later, I'm not like craving it, but I'm like, oh, I think I'm like ready to, it's time again. And then I'll start like, it's just like, you know, I'm not in control of it, but I definitely know how to like work with it as a flow. And taking a moment sometimes is exactly what the medicine doctor ordered or whatever it's called, the medicine man.
Right. I like what you say though about like communicating with your different aspects. Like, no, enough of this right now. You know, it's kind of that's like I guess exhibiting mastery over yourself. Like when you're able to kind of like when you're able to use your will to like, you know, kind of like and your energy to shape the world around you. That is like what the mystical life is for and about. And
yeah.
So I think part of that is like, you know, parsing apart your own selves and like talking to them and getting them talking to each other and like, you know, the round
and
table
becoming one
selves.
Which is actually, can I, because the synchro is like off the
Yes!
goddamn chart right now. So yesterday I was talking to someone through our like at the goal or take the gold pill account on Instagram. And we were like going back and forth on like synchro words. And it ended up being the word kibble, basically like the word techno or something from like Greek comes like Sibyl. And then we were looking up, I wonder if those have to do with like Kabbalion or whatever. And it turns out the word, they come from Sybil, who is the, let me just like open her up right now since you're here.
Sure.
And I looked up what Sybil was, and let's see.
Oh my gosh, does it connect to the Dark Mother?
Sybil is the mother of all gods and men and wild nature. But the reason you made me think of it is because of my multiple selves. And Sybil is classically a movie from the 70s about a woman who, and a book also about a woman with multiple personalities. And she's trying to go through it. But I think Sybil consciousness might be better than even like Eve consciousness, because as the mother of all, what did I say? Mother of like all nature and God and all that. What is it? Read it again. The mother of all gods and men and wild nature. Like I'm kind of obsessed and I love, let me give this guy a shout out from our little,
oh yeah, I know who you're talking about. And I saw those notifications coming in and I was like, hey.
Yes, it's at CIATLAZ. Not sure how to pronounce it. And sorry if that's blowing you up. I don't know. I don't want to make your life weird, guy. But that was really cool talking with you yesterday about that. So,
oh yeah, he's super insightful from what I've like the little that we've talked. So shout out to you. Maybe we'll have to like I'll send him this and be like, go to the 3-hour mark. And I'm just kidding. I don't know how long it's been.
But yeah, so Sybil, good name of the episode. But it's totally
Sybil consciousness.
Yes.
Okay.
But interesting, right? Because you I don't know how much like stuff you watch or whatever, but Sybil might be an interesting movie. I think it was Sally Field from back in the day.
I'll check it out. I'm kind of weird with
girl though.
Yeah, totally. I could probably get into something like that. Well,
you don't like movies?
Yeah, well, it has been such a joy to share this time, and I'm thinking that we should do it like every week. And that,
girl, if you're down, I am here for it.
It seems, I mean, it just seems like we could get on to like some really interesting threads. And I think, like you said, women are the creator of worlds, and so creators of, you know, literally like we have the potential to birth a new world. And so it's like, what are we wanting to birth, you know? And these are the questions that I really look forward to exploring with you, Amy. Thank you so much for helping get me out of my content rut. And yeah.
I love it. We'll see you next week, everyone. Come join us.
Yay, come join us. Bye.